This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into. So let's just jump into it. First question is from Aaron, who says, hey Q, if you were to be AB, how would the wide receiver room look like in week 1? And who are my favorite free agent prospects to add this offseason? I'm from Germany. So sorry for my English. No problem, Aaron. If I'm Andrew Berry, I think the wide receiver group should get bigger. I think you want to get bigger across the board on offense. One of the things that the Browns have lost the ability to do is really push the ball in the red zone and in short yardage, just run game. And I think the solution to that is just get bigger guys at wide receiver. It will help with blocking in the run game. It will help with getting guys open downfield. If you look at DeShaun Watson, one of the things his favorite targets always have in common are size. He likes to go downfield. You need some bigger guys. You look at CJ Stroud, who attacks the game kind of similar to how DeShaun Watson does, right? Likes to take those deep shots. Well, you got to get some bigger guys downfield. So that's what I think is the solution for AB this year, is to look at some bigger wide receivers and get bigger across the board. Now that they're not running that strict West Coast offense, they're going to get some bigger wide receivers because, you know, the guys are usually smaller in that West Coast offense. Brutus Brownie says, what should be the goals for next season? The team exceeded expectations given on the injuries that they had. What will happen if they fail to meet the standard next year if there are no major injuries or typical internal Browns shenanigans? I think expectations are a multi-part thing, because what we like to do is say, I think that this team should get to the conference championship round, or I think, and just declare that in late January and make that the expectation for the rest of 2024. I think the expectation going forward for the Browns in the regular season for the next few years should be winning 10 to 13 games, right? You get to 10 to 13 games in the regular season, and then we see how we feel about how we got to 10 to 13 games. Because as we saw this year, there are teams that can get to 11 wins and look like food in the playoffs, like the Philadelphia Eagles. And then there are teams that get to 11 wins and look dangerous in the playoffs, like the Buffalo Bills. So if I'm the Cleveland Browns or a Browns fan, I'm setting expectations first with, hey, you want 10 to 13 wins. If you get 10 to 13 wins, you are making the playoffs at the very least. At the very best, you are winning the division. I would hope that the team strives to try to win the division and all of that next year, but 10 to 13 wins is that range. That's what's acceptable for this team going forward. And depending on how you get there, will set the expectations for the playoffs. Even though the expectations for the Eagles were high this year, once people saw how that team got to the playoffs and limping, basically, the expectations shot down dramatically to the point where people didn't even expect them to beat Baker Mayfield. So that is kind of how I feel like expectations work, is you got to set one goal, see how you get to that goal, and then see where you are after that. But yeah, for next season, I think 10 to 13 wins will satisfy the regular season. And then once you get to the playoffs, I'm pretty sure people want at least one playoff win. I think people want to feel like the Browns have a legitimate chance to get to the Super Bowl. I think that's what the expectation is going to be setting. It's this feeling of, if the Browns give people an acceptable chance to get to the Super Bowl. Like, if they get eliminated in the divisional round next year, but you get eliminated in a game that's obviously between the two best teams in the AFC, like kind of like how the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs had that game that one year, I don't think people will be as disappointed. But if you get to the divisional round and you get beat by like Miami or something like that, a team that people don't even believe can get to the Super Bowl, then people are going to be very upset about that. Or if you get to the conference championship game and it's you versus Kansas City and Kansas City looks really good that year, or Baltimore, and you drop that game to Baltimore, people will be upset, but they will understand, hey, it just didn't go our way, versus if you get to the conference championship game and a team that looks very beatable gets there and you lose. Like, it's all about how you get to that goal and not necessarily the arbitrary thing of what you want, right? Because here's a perfect example. We're living through that example. A lot of us, once DeShaun Watson went out for the season, said, I'd be happy with the playoff game. And then they play the playoff game and get blown out, and a lot of y'all not happy. It's how you get there that matters when it comes to what the expectations are going to feel like they're set at. And I think ultimately the Browns next season, Browns fans want, if this is a healthy team, want to feel like they have a legitimate chance to win a Super Bowl. That's what Browns fans want. Right? A legitimate shot to win the Super Bowl. Whether you do it or not, I think people will be reasonable enough on if it doesn't happen. But that's the goal. Deontay Scott says, what are the tweaks to the offensive line that need to be made to keep them elite or at least semi-elite? It feels like it's time to start retooling the offensive line. I want to disagree with that. We know that Jed Wills has struggled at times with DeShaun Watson especially, but even throughout his whole career, he has struggled at times. DeJuan Jones being in the second year, you hope to see an improvement from him. But also, you're getting older with Joe Bitonio, right? Who knows how many more elite years he has left. You have Ethan Posick, who is fine. You have Wyatt Teller, who's good. But I think Jed, you need to find ways to get Jed more help, or for Jed just to get better. If I'm the Browns, I would really want to bring in a big blocking tight end, like somebody who could just be in there and block, and maybe be somebody you could dump it off to in the pass game every once in a while, but somebody whose primary focus is to block there, because I just think they need extra beef on that line. And if I'm going to draft a tackle to replace Jed Wills after this season, I would think that you want to get somebody whose best trait about them is their strength and length, because the Browns' biggest issue is their inability to kind of pin down the tackle positions and run plays too. So if you could just get some strength and length for the future, that would be very huge for them. But that's what I would think. Brown says, do you think Jim Schwartz can fix the road issues this offseason and also fix our defense's inability to play competent zone defenses? The road issues, stuff like that's cyclical in the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a good example of this, where they were a great home team 2 years ago, and then this year they were one of the worst home teams in the NFL. Sometimes you just don't play well on the road for whatever reason, and there's really no fix to it other than just to have the new season come along. And I think the new season will fix the road issues, but it's also, you might not be as good at home. But I don't really think that there's much of a fix to that. And as far as the inability to play competent zone defense, they can play competent zone defense. It's just sometimes they try to make plays within that zone that breaks. I think that they're just going to be a defense that's going to give up some big plays every once in a while, because they kind of gamble like that. Like, every time we talk about a team being held under 80 yards and all of this stuff, and we celebrate it, like, part of getting those kind of performances means that you have to kind of live with the performances where you give up 3 or 4 big plays. It's just the cost of doing business. The Browns like to take some risks. They like to take some shots. They have players who like to take risks. And for every pick six that you get that wins you a game in Baltimore, there's going to be a play where you let Brevin Jordan run for like 80 yards, or not 1-to-1 exactly, but it's part of the trade-off, right? The Browns had plenty of moments where that worked out for them. They had a handful of moments where it didn't, and that's the cost of doing business, to be honest with you. 4 Orange says, do you think that Watson has a direct input in the offensive coordinator hiring? And if not, do you think that that could be an issue? Wasn't coaching differences and not having to say a lot of what led him to sit out in Houston in 2021? Here's the big difference in that. DeShaun Watson had the ultimate say in who his coach is right now, because he ultimately decided to sign a contract and waive his no trade clause to play for the Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski. Now, if the Browns had fired Kevin Stefanski, DeShaun Watson would be front and center in this head coach search, and he would be able to help them out and answer questions and be able to, have a say in who the Browns hire. As far as offensive coordinator goes, look, DeShaun Watson is going to be well thought of when the Browns look into offensive coordinator. So I don't think this is anything that he would have to worry about. And I don't think that this is really anything that parallels anything close to what happened in 2021 in Houston, which was they fired the head coach and then they did not care who would be the next head coach, as far as what Watson thought of that. And honestly, Watson's issues with Houston had less to do with them changing the head coach and not talking to him, and more to do with stuff like DeAndre Hopkins getting traded. Like, it didn't feel like the organization was trying to win at that time. All those things kind of landed into why Watson felt the way he did. Not necessarily just the coach thing. It's not trying to boil it down to one thing. I think it's a bit of a mistake. Dark Matter Wolf says, so with Stump Mitchell gone, what's Nick Chubb's run game going to look like, or future? He will be respected. I think with Stump gone, Nick Chubb's going to be fine, man. Nick Chubb wasn't relying on Stump Mitchell to figure it out for him. Nick Chubb's Nick Chubb. What I'm worried about with Nick Chubb is his ACL recovery, not if Stump Mitchell going to be there or not. Nick Chubb going to be fine. He's Nick Chubb, so I really wouldn't worry about that. The problem that they had is that they couldn't get anybody to step up behind Nick Chubb, and that's where Stump Mitchell, is going to be evaluated, right? We know Nick Chubb's good, and the run game is going to be good when you got the best running back in football. But how do you have one of the worst run games just by missing one player? Like, we couldn't even be average, and I think that's why Stump got the boot. Dev says, should Kevin Stefanski take a step back in play calling and let the next OC have more of a reign on the offense depending on who we get? This is an impossible conversation to have until we know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. Should Kevin take a step back if they hire Eric Bieniemy? Probably. Should Kevin take a step back if they hire Clint Kubiak? Probably not, right? It depends on who you get. So I don't understand the fascination with Kevin Stefanski and the play calling, to be honest with you. I think that the team's problems, whenever they ran into issues, were more than the play calling, at least. I don't think the play calling was the big issue. I think it's kind of overblown. It's something we can always point to and say things that we complain about with the play calling shit. But I just don't think that the play calling was the issue. I think the issue was that they couldn't create explosive plays outside of a traditional West Coast offense. I think the issue is that they couldn't consistently run the football. Those are the things that were big issues for this offense. The play calling could give a care less who does it. It's probably going to be Kevin. And look, if they give it to somebody else and they call a bad play, who y'all gonna be mad at then? Y'all gonna be mad at Kevin still. So it doesn't matter who calling the plays, you still gonna be mad at Kevin. Like, Kevin called the plays or not, you gonna be mad at Kevin. Like, it's just more stuff to be mad at Kevin at. I don't get it. Master says, what are the expectations for DeShaun Watson next season? I have a friend who's a Raven fan, always asks why I'm the only Browns fan not ready to give up on him. And I tell him he deserves a full healthy season. Does he not because he was excellent with the Texans and he missed almost 2 years? He started to look good before the injury, which tells me he was starting to get back into rhythm. What are your thoughts? I think DeShaun Watson needs time, right? I think we need time. I think we need to see him put consecutive games back to back. But the question is right now, can he do that? Can he stay healthy for that, right? That's what we'll figure out this year. Like, I think that's the bigger concern. Like, they'll figure out the offensive stuff. They'll get some guys here, add some new concepts, do some RPO stuff, and that'll be all fine and good. And I think DeShaun's going to be able to be comfortable in this offense from a mechanical standpoint and from a structural standpoint. And we're going to be A-okay. That's not what I'm worried about with DeShaun Watson. I think those concerns are much overblown. The worry with DeShaun Watson for me is, can he stay healthy, right? He's getting older. His body started to break down on him last year. We'll see if that was just a freak year, because sometimes that happens, or if that's more of a trend. I mean, we went through this with Aaron Rodgers, right? Where Aaron Rodgers was like 36 or something like that, and it looked like his body was breaking down, and then he bounced back and he was fine. But yeah, I think they need to figure out, like, hey, can DeShaun stay healthy? If DeShaun stays healthy, I think they'll be fine. I think he'll put up fine enough numbers, and he will be good enough to the point to where we're not talking about it constantly. I don't think he's going to be good enough to be like an MVP candidate, but he'll be fine. He'll be fine enough for the Browns to reach their expectations. Like, he'll be objectively good if he stays healthy. In my opinion, I just think that he needs to stay healthy, and that's the big concern. Can he do that? And I don't mean just play all 17 games, by the way. I mean, like, can he like stay actually healthy? Or are we talking about, oh, well, his shoulder and this and that, and he's still coming back from that high ankle sprain and all? Like, if we got to do that all season, the writing's on the wall. But if you don't got to do that and he plays well, and you know what I mean, like, that's where I'm at with the whole Watson thing. But thank you guys for asking the questions. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.